Okay, first of all, let me just give you some background. We don't carry out studies. What we do is we look at the available studies and synthesize them. We being the Centre for Evidence-Based Medicine in Oxford University. What we did is, what we are doing is a review of evidence as this evidence comes out, and there is a lot of it, as you can imagine, because there's a lot of interest, a lot of activity, obviously, because it's the number one health topic in the world. Part of this has been looking at studies which traced the earliest recognizable isolates or SARS-CoV-2, and most of them come from sewage. These are studies on sewage and wastewater. Now, this is nothing new because public health engineering and water management are part of public health, and it is well known that some agents pass into wastewater having been through toilets, and they get into wastewater and surface water, and they act as some kind of surveillance. So we have a series of studies now which throw up hypotheses because they need to be confirmed, the findings. The earliest isolate comes from Barcelona in Spain in March 2019, 12th of March. Now, this predates the first case of COVID-19 in Barcelona by about 11 months, if the results are confirmed. We have other studies, like for instance from Brazil and from northern Italy, that show a similar but later pattern. We also know that, for instance, in France, there was a case of COVID-19 in late December. Now, this would suggest that the viral spread was far larger earlier than what we thought. And where it originated from, how it adapted, when it adapted, we don't know. There are three competing theories on this, but these are all theories.
So the test in Barcelona, what would it take for you to, what more information would you need from that test? Because it does seem very rogue, to be so much earlier in the piece. What would it take for you to believe that, yes, SARS did in fact come in Barcelona in March 2019?
Well, one of the problems is that the sewage itself and the tests used don't actually tell you whether the actual viral particles were alive. They recognize pieces of its RNA, of its nucleic material. So you can't say that sewage is infectious. In fact, it probably isn't because of the dilution of the virus in there and the degrading effect of going through the sewage itself. It's possible, but it's very, at the moment, there is no evidence of that. What did it take me? A series of studies repeating the same with the same methods and getting the same results, because the tests that are used are sometimes not quite as reliable, and we just need to keep on investigating, and we need to get the same answer or different answers, which could throw different hypotheses up.
So nothing is confirmed. This is very much a possibility at the moment, and you need more data. Right,
but you get that from every researcher you speak to. We need more data and more data. But this, there was also reports in the media on Sunday about a possible similar cases in a mine, disused mine, in fact, in southern China in 2012. Whether that's the same viral lineage or similar, and then it's evolved, we don't know. But it needs confirmation. It needs further study. Yes.
Now, you've been quoted as saying that the virus sort of hangs around, it lies dormant until the right conditions come along. What are those conditions?
Not necessarily this virus, we don't know that, but if the Barcelona results are confirmed, it would certainly suggest that kind of thing. But let me just take you through, for instance, a study that was done in 2012 in 2 kindergartens in Copenhagen, where they tested the surfaces, things like toys, covers, play tables, and so on. And these were heavily positive for all sorts of respiratory and enteric viruses and microorganisms, which is what you would expect. We live with these. They're all around us. The question then becomes exactly what wakes them up and what makes them aggressive, what conditions makes them aggressive. I'm afraid I don't have an answer to that. What we have is a series of hypotheses, studies, for instance, that looked at the meteorological conditions, ultraviolet, levels of pollution, wind, humidity, and so on. We've reviewed 14 of them, and you can read our review on our website, the Center for Evidence-Based Medicine website.
So do you believe that SARS-CoV-2 could be one of these viruses that lies in wait, I guess you could say?
It's possible. You see, the thing is that SARS-CoV-2 was identified at the end of December and 2019, and it could have been there before, but of course we wouldn't know because we didn't know about it. And like that, there may be many more. But once you know that it's there, the old saying, "Look and thou shalt find," applies.
So do you think there's enough doubt there that maybe the virus didn't originate in China, or again, we just don't know?
I'm not. This thing about originating in China, I am not sure what significance that has. If you look at the last 10 influenza pandemics, some of them were pandemics, some of them may have not been pandemics, and some of them may not even been influenza. There may have been other viruses. People have tried to pinpoint, it comes from Russia, it comes from China, it comes from there, it comes from there. Maybe it comes from nowhere. For instance, the 2009 influenza pandemic, the first case was in Mexico. But I am not sure that pointing to the exact geographic location is very helpful unless we have a clear idea of some particular animal-mankind interaction which happened in a particular situation and could shed light on this situation.
Do you believe there needs to be more done on the ecology of the virus?
A lot more. Let me just give you an idea. Just before the pandemic, in the end of 2019, some Italian in the Common Cold Unit in the United Kingdom. So it's 12 studies over some 60 years. And that makes it 2 studies a year.
Why is it important to study the ecology of this virus?
It's important to study the ecology of all microorganisms, not just this virus. We need to know a lot more. But if we do understand how it evolves, if we do understand where it lives, or if we do understand most of all how it transmits, how it ignites, what accelerates it, what moves it, then we can intervene. And we also have to bear in mind the possibility that we are the culprits, that we have generated this by changing the ecology of our planet. I'm not an ecologist. I'm just a doctor, just a clinical epidemiologist. But it's a possibility that I've read about, widespread.
we've seen outbreaks in meat packing and food processing plants. I mean, what role does the environment and you know the interaction between people in environments play in the transmission of this disease?
How would it get into why specifically a meat packing plant? This is what we have to look at. The unusual is very important in epidemiology to shed light on the usual. Why would it be in a meat packing plant? Is it because the temperature is about right, so that we are defrosting possibly contaminated meat, or the contamination comes from people's hands or from people's breaths, while the meat is defrosting, but there may not be transmission through meat, there may not be transmission through food, but there's something about the meat packing plant which encourages this kind of the person-to-person transmission. I think it's possibly the environmental conditions inside these plants. So low humidity and probably low temperature, ambient temperature.
So what research do you believe needs to happen now? Where are the gaps, do you think?
What we need to do is we need to formulate a series of hypotheses as to what we've discussed. And these hypotheses need to be tested. They need to be confirmed or thrown out. And we also need to depoliticize the whole of this discourse. And we need to be open and share what data we have, because this is a global problem.
And I mean, at the moment, all the energy has been putting into find a vaccine and find different treatments. So you feel that there needs to be just more energy going the other way and looking at, as you say, back at the real sort of basics of it and the transmission and where that happens.
You're asking me questions and I'm giving you ignorant answers. That's because I am ignorant, and that is because we are ignorant. And I've explained why. Because 2 studies every 10 years on the ecology of a particular virus, which has got a history, the phylum has got a history of causing outbreaks. Think about the 2002-2003 SARS-1 outbreak. Obviously, there's got to be some change in the way that we investigate and we understand our planet and the other components of our planet. Remember, viruses are not living things. They are inanimate. They require other cells. They're not cells, they're subcellular. They require other, they require substrate, i.e. they require some aid to reproduce, which is why they infect cells.
At the moment, we're all being told, wear masks, the droplets, that's how it's transmitted. We're being told to wash our hands. Is there anything in the studies that you've been reading up on? Is there anything else that we should be focusing on, do you think?
The evidence on masks is not very clear, again, for the same reasons. These are studies which are incredibly difficult to do, underfunded, so undersized, reported in 10 pages, which is not really sufficient. It's not sufficient space to report a study in sufficient detail. The evidence for hand washing is a lot more convincing. I'm talking about the community now, and I'm not talking about healthcare workers. So masks in the community, the evidence simply is lacking to make a firm recommendation. But hand washing seems to work incredibly well, especially in children, especially in schools. If you teach them at every break, every lesson break, you teach them to wash their hands thoroughly with a teacher supervision, then you get a lower, significantly lower rate of infection. That's all infections, respiratory and enteric infections.
Do you feel that, I mean, you said before, we're all ignorant about this virus. Do you feel that this is just really what we've discovered so far is the tip of the iceberg?
It's probably going to go very much like the early days of HIV, where people were just beginning to understand what we were dealing with. And yes, indeed, we're just discovering every day. I'm reading stuff which is, to me, is incredibly interesting. I just finished reading a paper which gives 3 possible origins, evolutionary origins, for this particular virus. But the paper is incredibly honest. They say that the data is so thin that any new data could swing against the other 2 hypotheses in favor of one. So we're just ignorant. But ignorance and uncertainty are the engine of science.